Hello, and welcome to Session Share, the Coaches Podcast. My name's Craig Bursell, and I am joined by Shamus John this week. I have been fortunate enough to work with Shamus on and off for a few years now. Shamus has his C license, multiple years of coaching experience, but the main reason I wanted to get Shamus on the podcast is due to his expertise knowledge of the college landscape. Shamus is head women's soccer coach for Union College of Union County, New Jersey. He's also head coach and college recruitment officer at Princeton FC. As a coach myself who works with players prior to going into college, I know this can be a real difficult time. So this episode is all about how players, parents, and travel coaches can help prepare the player for college. How are you doing today, Shamus?
I'm great. How are you, Craig?
Doing well. Really looking forward to delving into this episode because it's a real important time for players and parents. And I know as myself, as a dad of three who are all under the age of 13, I know when my time comes, it's going to be very daunting, even though I've been in and around the game my whole life. So speaking of being around the game, tell us a little bit about your background. What got you interested in football?
Yeah, so my mother was a women's college soccer coach in the United States. She started at Ocean County College and was there for 5 seasons. She went 69-7 there. She's in their Hall of Fame, National Coach of the Year, all these great accolades. And then she went on to coach at Rider University. And so this was all during my early childhood. So my earliest memories as a kid are on a pitch with women in football, traveling the country, seeing all these great things, having these wonderful experiences. And I was at training sessions. I was at every game. So that was like my formative years. And that's where I kind of always wanted to be in this space. And so that's where I got into the coaching aspect. My mother and I started a coaching business together. We ran it together until she passed. And so when I talk about soccer and I talk about college, it's impossible for me not to talk about it without bringing up my mother, Peggy Graham, who was an amazing coach and amazing person. So it's kind of full circle for me. So it's really exciting to do what I'm doing now.
That's fantastic. So, like, basically, you've been in and around college literally since birth, basically, haven't you? So,
Yeah, and so like my family friends are all either current or former college coaches, people I grew up working with at the Corver camps when I was a kid, high-level high school coaches and college coaches. So I kind of was like this little sponge absorbing all this different information about the game.
that's amazing. That really is. And like I said earlier, I've been a coach for like far too long now 20 plus years been coaching, and I have three boys, but all under the age of 13. I didn't grow up in America, so I haven't got the experience of college in America, and it's extremely different in England. Due to this, my knowledge to like pass on to our listeners is like very limited when it comes to college. So how do you help players and their families understand how to handle the college landscape?
Well, I think the first thing I like to do when working with players who are just starting their recruitment process is to figure out a few simple things. Because in America, yeah, there are so many colleges and there are so many teams. And, I have this mentality that there's a team out there for everybody. There's a level out there for everybody. If they want to keep playing the game they love, there's a place for them. And we just want to find that right fit. So there's a few things I like to do to help determine that right fit. And the first question, and it catches people off guard, is how far are you willing to be away from your family? So if you're, a college soccer player and you're playing on a program at the Division 1, 2, or 3, or even junior college level, and you're on a really good team, you usually don't come home for Thanksgiving. So are you okay potentially not coming home from August till Christmas and then not being home again until June, and then potentially taking summer classes and training at the school in the summer? So you really are moving for 4 years to where you're going to be playing. That's a possibility. So are you okay with your parents and family not coming to your games because you're in California and you're from New Jersey and it's hour flight? These are things that you start that conversation, because once we start building that radius of where you're willing to travel, then we can start talking about the schools and the level of competition. But until we don't know how far you want to be from home, we can't have that conversation. And that question is usually hard for kids to answer, because sometimes they're like, yeah, I just want to go and play. And it's like, well, hang on. Your mom comes to every game. Are you okay with her not coming to any games? And then like, well, and then that starts a deeper conversation about what they're willing to do and where they're willing to go.
Wow, that's fantastic advice, because that already is something that I wouldn't have thought about. Obviously, as a parent, I think about my boys moving all the way so far that, like, obviously they've lived in my house their whole life. That
Mm-hmm.
is a scary, daunting thing for the parents, and as you see, for the player when they start realizing how far you need to go. So that's really good stuff. You mentioned earlier as well about finding that level. Can you touch base on the different levels? Is Division 1, 2, and 3, and dispel any myths about them?
Yeah, so the NCAA, the National Collegiate Athletic Association, there are three divisions for college soccer and for most athletics. Division one is the top level, and within that top level, there are even varying degrees of levels based upon the conference that you find yourself in. Division two, so Division one and Division two offer scholarships. That's the biggest difference between them and Division three, which means it's not academic scholarships; these are athletic scholarships. This is the college giving you money to attend school there in exchange for playing soccer. So that's the Division one and Division two difference between Division three. But then in America, we also have the NJCAA, the National Junior College Athletic Association, and we have the NAIA, two separate divisions outside of the NCAA. The National Junior College Athletic Association is 2-year schools. These are comprehensive community colleges and community colleges all over the country. And the NAIA is predominantly in the Midwest, which operates at a separate set of rules from those two conferences. The NJCAA is similar to the NCAA in terms of its eligibility requirements and its structure. And within the Junior College Athletic Association, there's also 3 divisions for athletics 1, 2, and 3, and Division 1 and Division 2 in the junior college levels also give scholarships. So we really have, if we're talking just the NCAA to junior college, we have 6 levels of collegiate soccer. So that's kind of the broader aspect of it. Your top Division 1 schools, we're talking about like in our home state, Rutgers University, talking about Villanova and Pennsylvania. These are big schools that are very serious about athletics, and that plays a part into it too, because a smaller school at the Division 1 level might not have the same funding as a bigger school at the Division 1 level, and that's where your scholarships come from. And so we talk about these fully funded, non-fully funded programs. So there's a lot of nuance in there. I'm afraid if I'm running on a little bit about it.
No, it's very important stuff, and all these different, like, already feels confusing at times when you hear so many initials being broaded all over the place. Are there restrictions that prevent you from going, or is it all about academic?
So the base requirements to get into a university are usually like what allow you to play at that school. So every school has an admission standard. So the higher academic schools are harder for students to get into already. And most of those higher academic schools, like Princeton, for example, they don't lower their academic standards for athletes, where some schools might have that wiggle room where, we want to get the best athletes in here and we're willing to, I don't want to say take a different type of student, but they're a little more open minded towards different students if they have an athletic incentive for the university. So academics are the one of the most important parts. Like if you're going to college, especially if you're going to play soccer in college, academics have to be number one. And if your GPA is below a 3.0, it's going to be very difficult for you to get recruited and to become eligible. The eligibility is between 2.0 and 2.5, but most college coaches want to have high academic achieving teams. So they kind of always ask kids when they first meet them, like, what's your GPA right now? Because if it's below a certain thing, they're probably just going to say your grades aren't good enough for us to get you into our university.
Understood. Very important stuff. Shamus, we'll be back after a brief message from Zencaster where we would like to talk about colleges and how we best fit into those. Do you have a story to tell that the world needs to hear? Have you struggled with reaching new audiences who are engaged with your story? It might be time for you to start a podcast. Let me tell you about a platform we use here at Session Share. Zencaster makes it super easy to produce a high quality broadcast with 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes ums, ahs, you knows, and 22 other speech patterns. Zencaster makes it super easy to produce a podcast that sounds great. Ready to tell your story? Check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencaster. Welcome back, and we're going to continue our talk on players and their pathway into college. So, Shamus, parents just want to find the right place for their child, and players just want to find that they fit in. How do you define the right fit? What do players focus on, and how do they find the school that's right for them?
Yeah, I think this is really important. It's something I like to talk about a lot, like finding that right fit for each kid. Because sometimes kids end up going to the wrong schools for the wrong reasons. Over 60% of freshman college athletes stop playing or transfer after their freshman year. So we want to try to change the conversation with kids and help them find the right place for them. And there's a lot of different varying factors to help them do that. The first conversation is that distance conversation. The next conversation is what's your budget? Because most college soccer players, even at the Division I level, will end up having to pay some amount. So understanding like what you're willing to pay, what loans you're willing to take out, what you might qualify for in financial aid. This also plays a factor into it. And then figuring out your course of study. What careers are you interested in? What excites you? What do you feel you want to learn more about to become a more well-rounded adult? And then I think the soccer decision comes in. I think you need to understand how far you want to go away, what you want to study, and what you can afford. And then I think we start thinking about, all right, well, can I play at this level, or am I better than this level? And kids really need to go and watch the game in person. You watch games on TV, sometimes it's hard to gauge the level. But when you're there in person, you can kind of feel the speed of the game, the level of play, and put yourself there. So I recommend players to go through that questionnaire almost of how far you want to go, what's your budget, what are you interested in studying, and then we start talking about the soccer level. And so once we have that menu of items figured out, we can start looking at schools and we can start comparing and contrasting. If we have if the player is at a good level, playing higher level soccer, they could start looking at the Division I schools in their area and then see who they're playing and maybe start basing their interests off of that and start looking into those schools more. But I think it's really important for students to understand their budget and what they're interested in studying first before they even think about like the level of soccer, because most 99% of the players aren't going to turn this into a career. So what's their career after soccer? We're going to get you to play soccer. You're going to continue playing the sport you love. What's the next step for you? So that's the thing we have to figure out first to build that right fit. Because if you're going to school just for soccer, then it might not work out the way that you're hoping it will. And then when it doesn't, you don't really have anything to fall back on. You don't have plans. So we kind of have to think of all the scenarios before the soccer scenario.
On a day-to-day basis, you're constantly working with players who are either in college or aspiring to get into college. As someone who's there on a day-to-day basis, what's the biggest advice you can give a player? What things should they be doing when they start looking for colleges?
So I think the first thing they should do when they start looking, or they're already in college. I'm sorry, could you?
So mainly for when, like for example, if you're talking about being a freshman in high school or being a JV or whatever, what steps should they be going through in order to make sure they're being seen, if you will?
Oh, yeah. So getting noticed by colleges, right? A lot of kids feel like they just have to perform and they'll get recruited. There's a lot of colleges in this country. There's a lot of coaches. They have varying resources. So if you're hoping that your talent alone will get you noticed, you're putting yourself in a very deep hole. You want to start utilizing resources that are available to you. And I always go with the free resources first, right? So like Instagram is a great almost every college soccer team has an Instagram page. It's monitored by a graduate assistant or by the head coach, depending on the program. And you can make a soccer specific Instagram account. And on your bio page, it can be, your name, your graduation year, your commitment status, your intended major, and then your email. And then you can just post, little highlight clips that you make to that Instagram page. And you can start using strategic hashtags, or you can even like at colleges you're interested in, and it might pop up in their feed and they might gain interest in you. It's another way to get noticed. It's not going to cost you anything, because in this college landscape of recruiting and different services, there's a lot of companies looking to make money. So before you invest, I always try to take the free options first. So I think that's something a kid can do right away, right now. They could make their own player Instagram account, and it's just for your soccer recruitment, and you update that when you make clips. There's other services like Sports Recruits, which we utilize at the club I coach at. And then there's new emerging technologies like Dark Horse Sports AI, um, and NCSA is another platform for recruitment. So there's a lot of ways to gain exposure online, and with coaches' time and resources diminished, they're more apt to use some online platforms that start doing their base recruitment. Another thing a player can do is they're going to attend a showcase. If your team's going to a showcase, they should look up all the colleges that are going to be there and figure out, oh, am I interested in any of these schools, and make a list of the ones they're interested in, and then email their coaching staffs with their schedule, maybe links to their recruitment profiles. So even if they don't get to see them, you can start a conversation. The next thing we can do is we talked about, making that list of how far you want to go, what you want to study. When you start doing that and you start finding schools, every school has an athletics webpage, and they have these forms called RecruitMe's. So it's a questionnaire. It's basic information, but it generates notification to the coach, and then that again can create dialogue with that coach, so that they recognize who. But most players aren't gaining the highlight railing stats. 20 goals a season. Most players are getting a couple assists, a couple goals, or they're a player. And teams really need guys like that, but they're not going to shine on stat pages. So they have to kind of do this legwork to get that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And you spoke about advice for a player. I know parents are trying to help their child get through all the college recruitment and everything, and up till that point of like high school, and some maybe a little bit too long in high school, parents have always stood a big part in the sports part of their career, and basically every part of the child's life. I know as we get to that point, you would encourage players to take more control. It shouldn't be like a parent, for example, emailing a coach. So what advice would you give a parent in order to trust their son or daughter to like go ahead and start pushing for themselves now?
I think parents should be supportive and hold their child accountable. Like if your kid has a dream and they want to work towards that dream of playing college soccer, and you see them wanting to do it, you have to maybe hold them accountable. Like, hey, did you email coaches today? Did you edit your highlight film? Did you update these things? And just taking interest in what they're doing instead of like being like, you need to do this right now. There's that fine line. I mean, as a parent, like that relationship of like guiding and directing, you know, and sometimes when we guide, the kid, they might fail, but they might learn a little more. Um, where if we direct, they're going to do it, but they might not have their heart into it. So if a kid really is passionate about this, they do need to take ownership of it, because college coaches, they're not going to call your parents. They're not going to email your parents when you're there. You're an adult. You're 18. You're on your way to being a full member of society, and they're going to treat you like an adult. And so if they're getting emails from mom, or when you're on your recruiting visit and your parents are doing all the talking, and you know they're going to be less interested, I feel, than a assertive, confident young person who has, a keen ambition of what they want to do. So I would always, if I'm advising a parent, I had a recruitment counseling session the other week, and the parent did talk a lot, and I take notes on everything. And that's my big note to them. Like, the kid has to be more vocal. If this is the child's dream, the child's ambition, I want to hear from them. and then I can ask you, the parent, a couple questions, but I really want to have the dialogue with the player because that's what the college coach is going to expect. And these kids are going to have to go on, recruitment trips, and they're going to have meetings with these coaches, and they're going to have to be able to have conversations. And I think this is a skill that kids can practice and parents can encourage, but they shouldn't be doing the work for them. So support and hold accountable, but don't do or direct.
Fantastic, fantastic stuff. So, in a nutshell, it's basically the player should take command, take control. Basically, the parents should be there to support and encourage, but ultimately, it's now the player's responsibility to contact coaches and get out there and understand all the information. Correct?
Yeah, 100%. They, long story short, my mother was coaching at Ryder. I used to go on recruiting trips there because, single parent, so we spent a lot of time together. And we were at this big tournament, and there was this big player that, Ryder University didn't have a lot of full scholarships. But she was going to give this girl a full scholarship. She was a star. And my mom went, just going to talk to her after the game, and the girl walked across the field, dropped her backpack, and said, "Dad, get that." My mom walked away and then called the girl later, like, "Yeah, we're no longer interested." And the girl asked why, and she explained it to her. Character matters, and you're always being evaluated on that. When kids are attending showcases, they worry about like not performing actions and doing certain things, but their character assessment, I think, is very important, especially when it gets to that higher level. They want to evaluate how you handle setbacks, how you handle bad situations. Are you a positive teammate? Are you a hard worker? Yeah, you turned the ball over, you took a guy on, that happens. But did you sulk? Did you throw your hands in the air? Or did you turn, sprint, and win the ball back? Or try to at least. Your teammate made a mistake. Did you badger them or did you support them? So these things people are paying attention to, and you have to be mindful of that. And things like your parents doing things for you, coaches notice that. They notice a lot of things because they're going to have to work with you for 4 years and be responsible for you for 4 years. And if you're not mature and displaying maturity, and your parents are kind of feeding into that in a public setting, it's a big red flag for a lot of programs and coaches.
Uh, that's really good stuff. And I remember speaking to a college coach not too long ago as well, where he would say that he would actually evaluate a player based on the warm up and sometimes not even stick around for the game because if they were messing about in the warm up, if they didn't seem to be taking it seriously, as you mentioned, it shows a lot about your character, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that lack of character can cost you that place. And on another note as well, in that is the fact that what some players need to understand is a coach will look at you just like an employer will look at you on every different level. They'll Google your name, they'll check your social media
Oh, yeah.
accounts, everything like that. So if you've got some inappropriate stuff on there, that could be, as Shamus said, a massive red flag. So make sure you clean that stuff up. The piece of advice I would always give someone when it comes to social media and everything: post what you think your mum would be okay with reading.
Yeah.
As simple as that.
Yeah.
That's the rule of thumb.
I got a great bit of advice a couple of years ago from a coach, and he said, you want to live your life like there's a documentary crew filming you. And for the first couple of weeks, it feels silly, but then you start like acting the way you feel like you should. It's like players, you should feel like you're under a microscope, like everywhere you go. There was this famous college basketball coach. She was at Michigan State, and she used to, her last test for like before they offered a full scholarship was she would go to a game where she knew the kids' team would blow the other team out. Like she knew they were going to win by like 50, and she wouldn't wear any of the gear. She'd sit off and just watch how the kid acted because the kid's not going to play a lot because they're going to be up by a ton, and watch how they interacted with their teammates, where they engaged and stuff. And so that was kind of her final assessment before they offered a full scholarship to someone.
Fantastic stuff. Shamus will be back after a short commercial break. Do you need fresh ideas for your football, soccer training? Then follow Session Share on YouTube and X. Our handles can be found in the show description. Session Share, for coaches, by coaches. Welcome back. We've had a great conversation so far with advice, strategies, and the right preparation with getting into college. We have a lot of coaches that obviously listen to this podcast that teach high school players. What advice, Shamus, would you give the coaches as they help prepare that player for college?
I think twofold. The coach can be very supportive and have an impactful role. in terms of, mentoring that kid, and they're going to ask them questions if they've built a good rapport. So I would say, don't be a gatekeeper in a way. Like, don't think, your team is better than a certain level of college play. If a Division III coach or JUCO coach is emailing you asking to, for contact information on a player and they want to get in touch, be supportive. Don't stand in a coach's way of connecting with your players, because they're interested in your players, and you ultimately want your players to go where they're wanted. So we ran into that a bunch, where it's hard to get in contact with players because club coaches aren't answering emails or texts, and it's infuriating. And what club coaches need to realize is the coaching world is very small at the collegiate level, and people move up. And so, if you, aren't willing to talk to this coach now when they're at, a JUCO or Division III school, well, in a couple of years, they might be at a Division II, Division I school, and then they're not going to return your emails asking to come look for a player. It's a relationships business. So I think building strong relationships with coaches that try and contact you is something club coaches can definitely do. One thing I encourage, and I do for the club I work at, is before every showcase, I send an email to every college coach that's attending, just with our club schedule, with our players' contact information, with myself and the coach's contact information, just so we're very transparent. Like, if you saw someone you like and you can't get home, let us know. We're very eager to support our players. So being supportive is huge. And then I think staying on top of your players, if you believe your players have the ability and the drive to play at the collegiate level, push them, inspire them, check in, like, hey, did you update your recruitment website? Did you email those college coaches that you're interested in? Did you respond to these things? Because kids tend to really respect their coaches and want to hear from them. So if your player sees that you're taking an interest in their college process, they're going to be more keen to progress in their work for it. I think remembering of dates and applications as well is important. Making sure the kids fill out their FAFSA, making sure that they're doing well in school. Taking an interest helps a lot.
You mentioned there about building travel coaches, like club coaches, building relationships with college coaches, and with that communication back and forth. What advice would you give that coach that is concerned about, like, for example, if I was going to promote you as a player, I was going to talk to a card coach and I start singing your praises, but it's not exactly accurate. So that way they then take this player based on your recommendation, but then they see that you were talking rubbish and now they don't want to recruit from you and your team again. How do you find that balance with obviously doing right by your player and praising them enough to be able to get the coach interest, but also either holding back or actually giving criticism to that college coach?
Yeah, it's a fine line. You don't want to squander a kid's opportunity, but you don't want to create a negative feeling towards your club or your team for the future, because you want to send more players on to the next level. And so I think you have to find a way to be as honest as possible while highlighting the kid's attributes. Whether if the kid has limited role capabilities, listen, they're a hard worker. They can get the job done on the wing. They're very coachable, but their technical ability does need some improvement. We've been working on their receiving on the back foot. We've been working on their driving into space, but they're still holding back, and maybe that's something you can improve with them. The kid has potential, but I just want to be honest with you. This kid's not going to be a world setter for you, but they're going to be a great addition to your team. And also, if the kid is a bad character, I think it's good to not comment on that. I think you have nothing nice to say nothing at all, because you don't want to create. You're talking bad about your players. You just want to say, listen, I don't want to comment on that. I can comment on their playing ability, and I can comment on their attendance and their factual things instead of the feeling things. So I think it's a very fine line, because you do want to do what's best for your players if you're a compassionate coach that cares about their future, which most coaches are in my track record. So I wouldn't be afraid to be honest, but highlight their positive attributes before talking about their deficiencies if the coach asks about their deficiencies, because they might want to know for varying reasons. Whether that's building their player profile for their team at the college level, or whether that's the decision between one player or another. If they know that this kid has other attributes, such as he's a great teammate, he's a great character. What he might lack in his athletic ability, he makes up for in his work ethic. He's become such a better player in the 2 years we've worked together. I know that in 3 years' time, he'll probably be one of the key members of your team if it's that type of kid. So knowing your players, knowing their positive roles, I think is important when having those conversations with college coaches, and then knowing how to navigate the criticism part and having that conversation with the coach.
Fantastic. And Shamus, to end the episode, I always like to finish on a lighter note. I'd like to know what your favorite moment is in sports. It can be anything as a player, a fan, a coach.
Yeah, so as a coach, I was the head coach at Allentown High School for a number of years, and we had a tragedy happen my first year when I got hired. A number of players were driving to school, and they got struck by a drunk driver. Two of them were life flighted to a major trauma hospital, and they went under surgery after surgery, and they were done for the year. We didn't think they'd ever play sports again. And then the next season, one had graduated, but three of them were back and were able to play, and they played their way into shape, which was a miracle in itself. And then we were playing a memorial game for a former player who had passed a number of years ago, the Brody's Honor Memorial Game. And this young man, Jordan Duffy, I can shout him out here. He's a wonderful young man. He charges in after a free kick and bashes in the rebound, and we win the game in overtime. It was almost a year to the date from his accident that he scores this game-winning goal. And it's just like, I get goosebumps talking about it now. It was a wonderful full circle moment of like triumph and overcoming impossible odds. And I know his parents were all emotional that night. It was wonderful. So that's right now, it's my favorite moment in football.
Wow, I think that's going to be my favorite moment of all the podcasts I've asked as well. So that is a fantastic moment. I can see why you like that. So, well, that's about all we have on today's episode of Session Share, the Coaches Podcast. Thank you, Shamus John, for joining me. Be sure to get in touch across all our socials to offer your opinion on all we have discussed. You can find the social media platforms we use in our podcast description, and we will also include Shamus's information that you can reach out to him to learn even more. So thank you once again, Shamus. I really do appreciate your time. This has been Session Share, the Coaches Podcast. Thank you for listening, and thank you for coaching the beautiful game.